Welcome to Between the Panels, the Four Horsemen Comics and Gaming book club-styled comic book podcast.
Okay.
This month
that's pretty long.
Cut back on his caffeine, wait. That's not caffeine, is it?
This month we are talking about Ted McKeever's Metropole. But before we get into that, I have introductions to do. Starting on the left, we have Ron Davis. Say hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron.
And Alex Yon. Say hi, Alex.
Hi, Alex.
And Ryan O'Loughlin. Say hi, Ryan. I'm not a follower. I'm not going to do it.
Trailblazer.
No, of course not. Now, first we start off every show with a little bit of a background on the book, just to kind of get your feet wet. So we just have a little bit of information here about Ted McKeever's Metropole. It is sort of something that sticks out about Ted McKeever is that generally in American comic books you have a writer and an artist, and he does something that's a little more akin to Japanese comic book artists in that he does the art and he writes them. And not only does he do the art, he does the pencil drawings, the ink, and the color. Apparently sometimes he does the lettering as well, but not for Metropole. Now, you may know Ted McKeever from some of his other works, including Eddy Current, Metaphor, and Plastic Forks. He also did the art for Peter Milligan's The Extremist. And he doesn't do, all underground stuff, third-party comics and such. He's done a few things that you may be familiar with. He worked with Randy and Jean-Marc Lofsier to produce a reimagining of the DC trilogy mythos. That's called the Elseworld trilogy, which encompasses Superman's Metropolis, Batman Nosferatu, and Wonder Woman, the Blue Amazon. Now, in terms of Metropole, that was completely produced by Ted McKeever, with the one exception of Phil Felix. That's his parents.
That's a lot.
His parents. Wow.
Phil Felix.
He was the letterist for Metropole, and we have Marcus McLaurin and Carl Potts as the two editors. We like to give credit where credit is due here Between the Panels.
Good job, guys.
And this book was originally published as 12 issues between 1991 and 1992 from Epic Comics. Now, we just kind of want to talk about its legacy and its reception and just kind of our general feelings on this book before we kind of get into the meat of our episode, which are discussion questions. So we'll have Alex kick us off because this was his pick for May.
Okay. One of the things the reason I gravitated towards this book for my pick was that when I first read this book, which was when it came out in 91, that to me it hit me really hard that all of a sudden
Did it fall off the shelf?
Yeah.
No, it's only the first issue is only 34 pages.
Yeah, it's kind of thin. Yeah, it didn't cut.
He was. Sorry.
God. The way the story was being told and what was being told, I had never come across really in comics before. The pulling in from the Book of Enoch, the Revelations, and the whole Armageddon thing and stuff like that. And if you remember back to 91, that was the first Gulf War. Or I'm sorry, 91 was the first Gulf War. I was in the process of getting married at that time, and so this book was one of those not life-changing, but it really gave me a massively different way of looking at comics. The art style, everything was harsh. It was
Very much so.
it was very claustrophobic. When you get into all of his stuff, when you're dealing with the city, when you're dealing with the cityscapes and stuff, everything is just seemingly small. Everything is jammed together really tightly. And then you have outside the city, and everything is nothing but wasteland. Everything is opened up and stuff. And it was just, I really liked how he did that. And that was the first Ted McKeever I ever read. And I went then back and got Eddy Current, Transit, and I was like, oh wow, anything this guy does, I'm going out and buying. And I've even read a bunch of the stuff where he's worked with Marvel and he's worked with DC and been a guest artist. not always as a writer, but always most of the time as a guest artist on other stories and stuff. Like the one I was showing you with Doctor Strange and Spider-Man
Bendis,
and
yeah.
stuff. Bendis was the one who did the writing for
Right.
it, but he did the art. And when you look at it, you definitely see
It's-
that art.
yeah.
You know, the Spider-Man is no longer, muscular and smooth and everything. It's kind of jagged edges. It's a little off-kilter
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And
So, would you say that Bendis like McKeever?
I think so.
Sorry, go ahead. Ron, do you have any thoughts walking into this book?
I had no idea what this book was about. I liked the story. It was a whole lot different than I thought it was going to be. I didn't realize it was going to be as deep as it was and as depressing. There's a lot. It was really depressing. Nobody wins.
No.
No, nobody wins. It is a good book, but it's a real heavy subject.
Well, I think nobody does win when the themes are life and death, because that's just the natural
true.
order of it. But I'm sure we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We definitely will.
So I'm going to start with a little bit of a confession. So last night we were here last night, the night before we recorded, and Alex asked me, "So have you finished it yet?" And I said, "I have not finished it yet," which was a half truth because I hadn't started it yet. So I started reading it last night at about 10 o'clock, and I finished it about an hour ago.
Yeah.
So unlike you, I didn't read it in 1991. I read it in 2018. So it didn't grab me initially because it was different, because it's
Different
2018. I've read things similar to this,
Yeah.
but as I got deeper into it and deeper into the story and the characters, there's a lot to like about this book, and obviously a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think we should get into
Jump
it.
into it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just my initial question is, do you feel you could recommend it to
Oh,
someone?
absolutely. Yeah.
Now, in that jump to saying, yeah, I could recommend it, is it there are certain people I can recommend this book to, or I could recommend this book to anybody?
I think I could recommend it to anyone. They may not like it, but I would recommend it to a lot of people. And a lot of it could come down to the subject matter. Some people don't want to read this kind of a heavy book. They want Spider-Man punching out the Hobgoblin. That's what they're looking for. But this is more of in this particular. I need to read this one again. I read it through once. I got the story. I see, but there's a whole lot going on underneath the hood of this thing than I think, and I think I've glossed over a lot of it. And I'm hoping that I'll learn a little bit more tonight.
I'm going to take the opposite stance, and I'm going to say that I would recommend it, but actually probably to a minority of people that I know that read comics.
That's kind of the way I do it. Like I said, this has been one of my favorite books for years and years and years. I think I have recommended it to probably 5, maybe 6 people in the past 25 years.
What stops you from recommending it?
The subject matter.
But it's
like you said, like some people don't want to read a comic book and be depressed. Most people read
True.
comic books for escapism.
Yeah.
And
you don't want to escape to Metropole.
even though I enjoyed this book, I would not criticize somebody who read it and said, maybe I appreciate this, but I didn't enjoy it because it didn't make me feel good. I'm like, understandable.
Yeah.
The few people that I have made this a recommendation to, it was always as a lead into a bigger discussion. That we had discussions on the nature of good and evil before, and I was like, all right, well here, let's start with this. Let's start at a common ground point, and I would hand them this, and then come back a week later, and like you said, they were all depressed and everything. And I was like, all right, now we're in the right frame of mind to talk about good and evil. So.
It's kind of like the process for making veal. You keep the young cow in a tight little box for a long time, and then you get them just right to where you want them for your discussion.
And you go in for the kill. All right, so I want to start before we get into the meat of the story. I want to kind of start and take a look at a lot about the artwork. One of the things that Ted McKeever has done, not only in this book, in some of the other books, is his muted colors. Mm-hmm. Nothing is bright. You compare this to an X-Men comic, you compare this to a Superman comic, the colors are always bright in those.
Right.
You know, the Superman's outfit is a very strong blue, very strong red, and the X-Men the colors stand out. They're very very obvious and stuff. This is everything's muted colors and shades of colors and kind of, I think you had mentioned it earlier, gritty,
Very
dirty.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like, you know, we need to wipe this stuff off to
Yeah.
get what the color is underneath, but the problem is it never goes away.
Yep.
And I really appreciate with a lot of the way he does things, and everything's also always, you know, his cities are never, you know, shiny, high-rise kind
They're
of stuff.
very lived in.
Yes, very industrial.
Very Chicago.
And not even the nice parts of Chicago. This is very much, you know, the north side of Chicago.
Also called Pittsburgh.
Yes, the north side of Pittsburgh. But, you know, everything is very, very dark and stuff.
It's
And
very Gotham-esque.
yes.
But even dirtier,
Yeah.
I might
Yes.
say.
Gotham, when I compare what he's done with Metropol to what you see out of the comics for Gotham and some of the other cities, there's always a transition point. You know, when you went to Arkham Asylum, you went from the shiny towers into the dark and stuff like that.
Dark, yeah.
There's no shiny. There's nothing positive. There's the whole structure is like, what the heck?
It gets worse. It
The
never
mayor's
gets better.
house was kind of nice, but then again, he also had a mob outside of his house.
And so, and some of the other things that he has done in it is he uses colors in the when he's doing the speech bubbles that are signifying not just the who's talking, obviously, but whether or
role.
not the role
Yeah.
the role of who's talking.
Yeah.
And I truly did appreciate that throughout the way it was done, because it kind of guided you sometimes without realizing what you were looking at.
But I actually didn't like that, because when I figured out, actually it was right here is where I realized what was going on with the speech bubbles, because Jack's was white. The other ones, who were clearly angels because they have the symbols, Jack doesn't have the symbol. And I kept hoping it was obscured with his hair.
You can't tell if Jack has a symbol or not right here.
But the bubbles were white. I'm like, okay, so something's gonna. And it kind of gave me some a little bit of a heads up of that something wasn't quite right with Jack, and I didn't really like that, because I would rather be surprised when it was revealed later on what was going on.
Well,
with him.
I also thought
page.
it was kind of obvious that Jack wasn't going to be an angel since he killed the rest of these characters.
Well, but yeah.
Brutally.
Okay, when he woke up and before he started talking, I honestly thought, I'm like, well, this is going to be some kind of a redemption story for Jack. You know, he did these horrible things. He wakes up, now he's an angel. Oh, I've done terrible things.
I don't know
Now
if
I've got
this
to
is
be
a
good.
redemption story for anybody.
Nobody. Well,
It kind of is for Enoch.
Yeah.
He's fulfilling the role because when you get to issue 7 and you see and everything is revealed to him, which it truly is pretty much right out of the book of Enoch, that you know that he is the one who is to tell everybody about the end times,
right.
and
Bears witness.
his role is to bear witness to the end times, to make sure that people understand they screwed up and this is your punishment. But one of the other things that McKeever is known for, and you don't see it in this one so much, but is the teeth.
Yeah, everything had a lot of teeth. that was unsettling.
Those are not teeth.
Yeah.
and they're always these very
little, tiny, sharp.
but
pointy
there's
bits.
just more than ever should be in a
you don't
mouth.
need that many.
and this was before someone changed. This was just a regular
That's the
person.
dude, yeah.
You know, and he's always done it, that there's something grotesque about the teeth and the mouth and kind of stuff. And he's known for it. And it shows up throughout the whole book that outside of the angels, this is what you run into, is that the humans and then the demons and stuff, they all have the teeth are drawn like that. And it's something that shows up in other works that he's done as well. And so it's a very consistent style with what he's doing and so forth. But I always thought it was pretty interesting how he worked through those stuff. And then when you see Sacriel for the first time, which is this image right here,
The first angel.
the first angel, Sacriel here. hit on some of the four big characters. You got Sacriel, you got Enoch, you have
Gabriel.
Jackwack. Well, I wasn't going to go with Gabriel, but I was going to go with Jackwack and then Noah because that kind of surprise pull in towards the end of the story.
Noah actually didn't have like a lot of panel time in the first one.
He doesn't, and when you pick up Metropole AD, he brings in a role because they have that collision point at the end in issue 12 as, okay, wait a second, there's other angels out there.
Well, they knew there was a fifth one. Because first you think it's Jack, and then you think it's Eddie, and then you find out it's Noah, and you're like, God, Ted, stop jerking me around.
But the funny thing is, the four angels knew there was a fifth, but the fifth angel never knew there was another four. And so that's why there's that collision that's happening that when the human mentions it and brings it up.
I love the line in the first issue of Metropole AD where Noah meets the human, and he's like, oh, there's this building, and there's 4 or 5 angels there, and he goes, there's 4. Because I'm the fifth.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
Now, this Metropole actually, I mean, it draws a lot on biblical themes and biblical. There's a lot of biblical quotes in here.
Really, I didn't get that.
You didn't pick that up? It's kind of obscure. So I'm familiar with Enoch and Gabriel, and that is Sacriel. Is she?
Well, that's the thing.
Is she a thing?
Gabriel is considered part of the Hebrew tradition of angels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, him I understand. Yeah.
Enoch is not an angel. Enoch was a precursor to Noah prior to the flood, and the whole book.
Also, Noah is that Noah?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Just a name reference.
Yeah.
Because they all have biblical names.
Yeah, I mean, but there's not a lot of names given to angels actually in the Bible. It comes from other of the apocryphal writings is where you come in with names of angels and stuff like that.
And even more so, all the angels that are referenced are all New Testament. I don't think there's any angels referenced in the Old Testament.
Not by name. They're referenced, they placed an angel at Eden with the flaming sword to prevent anybody from coming in. And, there are points, Jacob wrestled an angel, things like that. Or did Jacob wrestle God? I mean, there's all those kind of things that are going on. But Enoch, the book of Enoch, was very particular about that there were fallen angels, and one of the big things was the fallen angels, they came to Earth, they mated with humans, and they created, the Nephilim, thank you. Which, if you look throughout history, the way the Nephilim are seen are the heroes of old. Your Hercules type. Seem stronger than regular people, seem bigger than regular people. All of that kind of stuff.
Demigods.
Yes, very much so. And now, according to,
I can sing the song.
You're welcome.
Kids today, I swear.
You heard the Star Wars version?
No,
where it's Luke singing to Rey. It's really good. All right.
I'll check it out.
Now, where's my train of thought? It's so derailed now.
You're welcome.
I think there's a giant oil fire now where I was going. But one of the big things about this was that the difference between the biblical references in the Book of Enoch is the Book of Enoch says that's where the evil came from. The evil came to earth because of those fallen angels, and they were the ones who brought and spread the evil. Mm-hmm. The biblical reference goes, nope, man screwed up, and it's all on man. And so that's one of the big separations at that point. And so this is playing off that the demons and the angels are the angels who watch are the ones coming trying to fix everything, but the demons are the ones who are coming out to try and mess everything up. Humans are just the victims in the middle.
Did we do a general synopsis for people who haven't read the book?
No. Good pausing point to kind of reestablish the kind of the structure here. The idea of the podcast is that this was the book for May, so you spend the month of May reading Metropole, and then we come together the first Saturday of each month. So here we are, the first Saturday of June, where we're kind of discussing the book. So we're kind of assuming that you have read it. And also, another point of order, if you're listening to the audio version, there is a video version, which you can find on our YouTube page at youtube.com/c/ForestmanComicsGaming, where we actually show pages from the comic book to reference as we're discussing it.
And you get to see me, which is a big plus.
Yeah, maybe stick with the audio version.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can just move your hand over that part of the screen.
Yeah, and of course, you could just hold the book and look at it. That way you don't have to look at Ron.
What is that?
This is
in the world.
This is when you first kind of come across Enoch.
Yeah.
This was when Enoch and Jordan were having it out, or in his head when Jordan was on the table and he's getting zapped and trying to bring him back, but he's having this conversation with himself.
This is also the page I stopped reading at last night. All right, bedtime.
All right, not tonight.
And then woke up at 6 a.m. and continued reading.
This is actually, a side thing. This is actually one of the books in recent history that I've actually couldn't stop reading. Once I started it, I was like, oh God, I got to read the next one. Oh, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. One more book. So it actually helped my attention.
It's just like 30 pages. I can get through that.
I can do this.
I didn't have that initially. The first couple issues were a little bit of a struggle for me, but once I got into what was happening, then I got much more
once
into
the
it.
roller coaster started.
Right, and like with Jack Whack, when we're introduced to Jack, where he's pinning the suicide note on the guy he just killed, and making his escape, telling him, okay, don't tell anybody. You stay here and be quiet. Don't say anything when they come talking to you. And that how easy it was. How everything was easy. But your introduction to him is it's not a creepy. I mean, it is creepy, the fact he's pinning the note on the dead body, but he's not portrayed in that typical creepy kind of way. Everything is standardized colors and stuff like that.
Jack Whack initially reminded me of the Joker character. He just a very calm, completely insane person, just off the rails.
Oh, I like the fact that after you're introduced to Jack in this thing, he's walking along, and Sacriel bumps into him, and he turns around and yells at her, and then he trips over the body, and he gets upset and runs away scared.
Yeah.
It's like, this is the guy that just killed somebody and he's running away scared. It was just like, really, this kind of, you're right, when I first started reading this, there was like, well, maybe that's actually the main characters. We're going to find out something about him in this whole event and stuff, and not necessarily as twisted as it went.
Yeah.
Well, that tells you enough about his character, because he wants to do these things, but he doesn't want to see the consequences of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
want to commit murder, but then when I'm faced with the body when I wasn't expecting to see it, that's making this a real thing that I did, and I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah. Right, and especially, I mean, this one, quote unquote, is a clean kill because he's hung someone, and when he trips over the body, it's got the hand is shoved up through its neck, and the hand is missing. I mean, which still begs one of the best questions: where's the hand?
You don't want to
know. And then when we're introduced to Noah.
I like the Noah character.
I think he had one of the better introductions.
Right. I mean,
I liked Noah until the AD, like the 3-issue fall. I did not like him.
Well,
and I know there was a reason, but yeah, I did not like him towards the end. I was happy when he.
Just an FYI, if you haven't read it, there is a sequel called Metropole AD, which is 3 more issues that was published the following year.
Right.
Which I don't know why they didn't.
Because they probably licensed him for 12 issues, and then it probably went well enough, and they said, okay, well, we'll give you 3 more to finish it up.
The story didn't seem like it was done at the end of Metropole.
Yeah, but when he signed the contract, they probably gave him 12.
Right, because if you look in the back material of issue 12, it says coming next fall, Metropole AD.
Yeah.
And so, the story continues, that kind of thing. So it was, all right, we've gotten this far and we've been approved and we can move on with it and stuff. I was disappointed that the fact that it was only 3 issues, and I thought the wrap-up was a little quick.
It moved real fast.
Well, also take in consideration, this isn't Marvel or DC, this is Epic Comics.
Yeah.
Right.
They probably have significantly limited resources to get these things published, at least compared to what we're used to.
Epic is an imprint of Marvel, but this was the
that they're
the
limited
writer-
resources they're willing to give.
right, because this was the writer artist, just like Vertigo
Right.
on the
For DC.
DC.
Yep.
Epic was that version of it for the Marvel side of it, and I will give Epic this. Epic was did a lot more on the lines of truly allowing some creativity to go. When Marvel turned it over to the people who started running it, they truly stepped back and they were like, all right, you have free reign.
Go forth.
And you know, this many issues, you have free reign. Go for it, and
Yeah.
we will run your issues and stuff
I think
like that.
if I were the head of Marvel, that's exactly what I would do, because as amazing and brilliant and at the forefront of the industry as Marvel is, they have very specific rules and guidelines that they have to function within, and you can't really play with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there are expectations, and then it's even beyond the comic books now, where they specifically are under the spotlight of our culture in general because of the movies, where you can't go too far out of left field, or it's just not going to be a Marvel book.
Yeah.
Which is good and bad.
Right, and so having that separate imprint that allowed them to have a lot more flexibility was really, I thought, a smart decision on their part because of what came out of it. I mean, there was a number of really good epic.
Yeah, you would never look at this and think this was tied to Marvel in any way.
Exactly, because it defies all the Marvel rules.
Right,
It does not follow suit, and all that kind of stuff. Now, one of the things you and I had mentioned in our ramp up to this was in this, you're in one city, and the part of the story is going along. You start seeing things in the background of the panels where there's a TV on or a radio on, and it starts talking about the plague.
How bad things are getting.
And there's 50 people confirmed dead, and then it goes, there's 300 people confirmed dead. Now there's thousands confirmed dead. And so that's what's bringing in the pulling into the story the outside aspect of the volume of demons and stuff that are coming into it, and where they're coming from, and so forth. And in that process, one of the things you said, but they built a wall around it. That went up so quick.
Yeah.
Did it?
And in panels, it just seemed like it was like...
No, because look at this panel here. This is from the second issue.
Mm-hmm.
This is where Gabriel, before he was Gabriel, was looking through the hole in the wall and seeing the construction site. And one of the things is, what's that in the distance? And it's nothing but construction going on and on and on. Right. And in the very distance, it kind of looks like a hangman's noose.
Yeah, it's almost a noose.
It's a crane, but it looks like a hangman's noose. And immediately following this, you have this really kind of stark image that is this construction field, and that's the line, and then there's this huge city to the side of it. And but I mean, it started very early that this was going on.
Right.
They didn't recognize it until later, and when you get to the end, there is something that happens outside the wall. There's a TV crew that shows up,
and this is actually from AD.
Yeah, oh, that's right. This is from AD issue 1,
which I finished reading about 20 minutes ago.
28 minutes ago, actually, to be precise.
Now, when the people showed up outside the wall, that I guess that confirmed that humanity is still alive. Everything's still cool.
Yeah, this is
on the outskirts.
This is very self-contained.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's one of the things they talk about. That everything
they think everybody's dead in there,
both metaphorically and literally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they think everybody's wiped out, and now it's an arena for angels and devils to do good.
But the outside world is aware of the rumors that there are angels and demons doing battle, so that implies that somebody has actually gotten out.
True.
Or there is some communication that has happened.
Yeah.
Why
wouldn't they build a wall? You nuke it from orbit. Done. Lay waste.
Well, that kind of
walls stop disease.
Yeah, walls stop disease and plagues. Just build a wall. Ask Trump. He's building one.
Germs can't get through brick.
And giant snail heads. We haven't got the snail heads yet.
No, we haven't got there yet. So, looking at it, we've got all this stuff going on. We have the apocalypse, and by the way, this does have actually one of my favorite images of the apocalypse ever is when he's getting a delivery. Enoch is getting a delivery. Actually, Jordan is getting a delivery because he doesn't know what's going on, and it's one class grade A or first class grade A apocalypse. And trucks full of bodies. Yeah. It just dumped out everywhere. Please sign here. Yeah. And he does. And that's what gets me is he just doesn't know what to do. And so he signs here and the guy takes off leaving truckfuls of bodies. Yeah.
And essentially now he is responsible for the apocalypse.
So it is on his doorstep. And right after this is when
both metaphorically and literally.
Well, this was a dream, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was in his head, and when he was talking with Enoch, and Enoch left,
trying to
Enoch was nudging him, but then Enoch left until he was on the table, and they were trying to resuscitate him. Right. And Enoch came back with a vengeance, and well, actually not a vengeance, but just took over. Yeah. Sorry you're vacating, Jordan. I'm here now.
I got this.
Just real quick interjection. So in this, if you haven't read it, what are you doing? Pause this, read it, and then come back. So when the people die of the plague, they barf this huge green piles of
slime.
Yeah.
All right. So I read that all last night. Got up at 6 a.m. this morning to continue reading. And for those of you who don't know me, I work for the power company. I do customer service. So I talk on the phone for 8 hours a day with a headset. And had you ever have one of those burps where you feel like you're about to puke? I had a really big one in the middle of a phone call today and just had a huge image of Enoch blowing chunks everywhere in my head. I'm like, oh no, not now. Not now. I got to do this lady's move in.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I just, I got to pull my mic out of the way. So, but we start off with, angels and demons showing up, the apocalypse beginning.
Does he have a smiley face button on his white jacket?
Yeah, he's a Walmart employee.
Send your fan mail to.
Send your hate mail to.
And so, in doing this, they start building the story up and building the story. At this point, what did you think was being told? What do you think the story was? That, because we've got to the point where it's the apocalypse, but it's real early. I mean, we're like three episodes or three issues in.
I couldn't tell if this was a zombie book. I honestly I didn't think about the angelic direction this was taking. I thought this was going to be like a zombie end of the world kind of thing. I figured that the new Enoch guy was, I don't know what he was going on in his head, but I thought he was going to kind of be the main character, which I guess he kind of is. Zachary, I think, kind of stole the show for me.
Oh yeah,
she I feel like she's less of like the protagonist and more like a device that kind of pushes a storytelling device that kind of pushes almost. Not really like the mentor character from like an Obi-Wan or a Gandalf, but kind of like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of gods.
But she also, because she gets mad.
She does.
She gets mad at Gabriel. She gets mad at Noah, and threatens both of them.
But I think you think that was the effects that, like, what eventually took Noah down.
Well, very much. I don't know because.
But I think she recognized it and was able to dial it back.
Right. Her character has been aware of everything that was going on from the beginning.
Yeah.
All the other characters had to be brought up to speed. She came in and was introduced already an angel with that knowledge.
Yeah.
She's actually from the Eddie Current book, isn't she?
Right. She is Nun from the Eddie Current book. The role that Nun had was Nun rescued Eddie Current when I believe he fell off a roof.
She wore his suit or something?
No, she didn't wear his suit.
So
she kind of rescued him, but saved his. He had his Amazing Broccoli comics, where he had ordered the suit from, in case they were scripture.
So the scene
was the chosen one.
The scene where the demons throw her and Enoch off the roof is a throw back to Eddie Current.
To some extent, and because she survived, he survived with her help, kind of stuff. But she always saw him as a savior. He was coming to rid the world of evil.
She saw Eddie Current as a savior?
She saw Eddie Current as a savior.
I see him as Beetlejuice.
Yeah, I see him as a Deadpool, just off
He is kind of like a Beetlejuice Deadpool.
Yeah, yeah. He's a very
in this one, yes. In the Eddie Current story, he is he's insane. He escapes from the insane asylum, and over the 12 issues, it's 12 hours. Is how they told the story.
So it's like half an episode of 24.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And it's what he finds in the outside world and how he deals with it. And one of the things that was a very prominent thing that was going on throughout the whole Eddie Current thing, which always made me a little confused why he came back in this one, is because in the Eddie Current story, one of the guiding principles Eddie follows is that the hero dies in the end.
Yeah,
that's just how it is. You can't survive. If you survive,
if
you
you're
didn't
the hero. You die.
Well,
you didn't give it all.
Yeah.
He is dead in this book.
Well, yes,
with
but
skin
he's
like
very much
mayonnaise.
so.
Yeah.
And salad fingers.
Yes, it's salad tongs for fingers. But
Google it, kids. Don't do that.
What color do you prefer your waffles, Ron?
Okay. Often this book is thought of as an alienation story because everybody is on their own, and
until they're not.
And when they're not necessarily.
They're friendly because of circumstance. They're not friendly because it's the right thing to do or some higher.
But I don't know. I got the feeling that Enoch and I have trouble saying her name. The first angel.
It just says Sarah.
Sarah. But
She
she
hates
does.
that.
She hates
She
that.
hates that. Don't call her
But I
Sarah.
got the feeling that they were actual friends. Like that scene in Metropole AD when they're leaving the building and they're like reminiscing back to the day they met, and Enoch puts his hand on her shoulder, and Gabriel and the prostitute, they had a baby. I mean, granted it was from a one-night stand, but they seemed like they were getting along.
Yeah. Right, but if you look at this, he kind of sets up a pretty big dichotomy between good and evil.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he breaks down is that, everybody is alone. When you start off, Jordan is alone in his place, and he has no idea what's going on. Jack Whack is alone in doing what he's doing, and his interactions with people are always defensive or something along those lines, or horrible.
Or deadly.
Yeah, either way. That the connection between Gabriel and, I cannot remember her name off the top of my head. Uriel. Was a business transaction that she saw as a business transaction because, it's a place to stay for the night. And he saw it as, well, maybe, we can do this again. Maybe she loves me, all that kind of stuff.
I can get married, but I shouldn't ask her tonight on night 2.
That kind of,
Gets off work at the video store, goes to his favorite hooker, decides he's not going to ask her to marry him tonight.
Exactly. So, but everything is a lot about alienation and always trying to seek something out, trying to seek out some kind of comfort, trying to seek out some kind of
companionship.
Something. Now, admittedly, this was done in 1991, and the rise of the internet, Facebook, and everything else. I kind of reading this again in 2018. I put Jack Whack as Mark Zuckerberg.
Do you guys want to see my Mark Zuckerberg impression?
Too much emotion. It's way too much emotion.
And the reason I do that is because Jack Whack was getting all of the demons who were about nothing but themselves
and
come together.
If
we can do all of this stuff together, we can win. We can be in charge. We can do everything.
Scarily poetic.
Yeah. And I kept saying, in 2018, I'm reading this and I'm going like, wow. When I read this back then, I didn't have any of this direct connection. I couldn't place Jack Whack with something. But now, oh, good Lord, we're trying to be told that the best way to have social relationships is by a guy who can't have social relationships, that his design is the best thing in the world. What kind of freaky crap is this?
Mark, if you're watching, please don't sue us.
Please, bring it.
I don't know about that.
Write 4 horsemen.
Alex Yon. YOHN.
But if you think about it, the way the structure was, you have this alienation story, and both sides are complete alienation. And the one guy who's trying to bring him together is not trying to bring him together to do anything beneficial to everybody. It's kind of a totalitarianism.
Yeah.
I want
the power.
I want to be the power, and I want to tell you guys what to do because
Right.
I want to achieve this goal.
Yeah.
To the point where all the other demons are calling him master by the time we get to AD.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, and that becomes one of the big things. He has the little green thing that's next to him goes gobbly gobbly.
Yeah. What did
And
it
always has one word: gobbly gobbly, go, gobbly gobbly, stay, gobbly.
Is it bad that I kind of wish this book would have been titled Metropole BC?
That would have been perfect.
Yeah.
But and so that alienation thing kind of a number of years later is still relevant.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of same theme is going to come out, and actually in my opinion is a little more relevant than possibly it was then, because of all of the extra connections we have through social media and things
for
like that.
as many connections as we have, I think as a race we are becoming more walled off from other people.
Walled. Wait, there's a wall.
See what I did there?
Yes.
But who built the wall? Who built that thing?
They
The
did.
government?
The city did, or people
I'm betting.
outside?
I'm betting the city built their own wall. I always read it that the city built the wall, and that because this is our city, and we don't want anybody's interference. We don't want whatever.
Right.
And so that's how I always saw it. Now,
Huh.
whether or not Ted agrees with me, I don't
It
know.
could have been the government, the national government saying,
See, that's-
walling you off to.
That's what I was saying.
I think
I
it's-
thought it was an isolation maneuver to.
I think it's up to either way. Maybe you could say like the presence of the mayor on the wrong side of the wall is a clue that it was the national government, but
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we get past this, and we get very much into the idea of good and evil, and I think that's one of the biggest discussion points within this whole thing is that McKeever is kind of posited very simplistically, but at the same time throughout the whole thing is what is the nature of good and evil.
Okay.
And there's a number of arguments that take place in the discussions between the demons and the angels. We need to save them. No, they are our food. They are our
Entertainment.
Our entertainment. They're there for us. We're going to destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
And it boils down to the who's first? Is it me first or is it you first? And that's kind of how he's balancing the nature of good and evil. If it's me first, I fall on the evil side. If it's you first, you fall on the good side. Although even with the good side, we still have angels with guns, and I did like that.
It surprised me, the use of guns. I didn't figure that angels would be using, weapons.
I think
I thought like.
I love it.
swords
It's,
or-
you bastard, and when did angels start carrying guns?
See, I think that probably has more to do with your opinion on guns. I think Ron and I have kind of more of a negative opinion of actual guns. So when we look at an angel, a weapon we might expect them to use would be like a big holy sword.
A sword, yeah.
Because in my mind, that's very symbolic of good. In my head, guns are symbolic of killing and negative things.
Right.
But you might have different perspective.
No, I understand that, but that becomes down to the thing is, do you see angels as handicapped by good?
Yes. Yes, because they have a certain set of rules that they have to follow.
And in this instance, what is the rule they have to follow?
Well, so say there were 10 demons lined up and there was one person standing in front of them. Bad guy would just shoot right through the one person to kill the 10 bad guys behind him.
Right.
An angel would not do that. An angel would try to save the person before he took out the demons.
Right, but the intent is still to take out the demons.
Right. The intent is always to take out the demons.
Because if you step back and you look at this, the fact that it's structured as a combatant type situation.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got angels versus demons. It's not angels solely protecting humans. It is angels versus demons.
Yeah.
It's trying to take them out. Because there's a number of times when they come across the demons, there is no human involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But what really surprised me about the use of guns was when I think of angels, especially metal angels, I will get to that. They're very metal.
Excellent.
For a demon, something that can survive in hell on a regular basis, to be taken out by a bullet, that just seems, an angel seems way too frail, a demon seems way too frail to be harmed by a mortal weapon.
Well, remember that in this story, the demons are
people.
Humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also risen from the dead, so there's obviously something else at play
But
there.
I mean, they're still mortal because they can die, and the angels are the same way.
Right, and that kind of surprised me. This take on angels and demons, where we have these supernatural beings, but they can still get hurt. And actually, they realize that later in the book, like, oh crap, we can die, guys. We need to just be a little bit cooler about what we're doing.
And I think that was one of the kind of bringing this down, that they're not immortal beings.
Right.
They may be supernatural.
They can actually be harmed. Yeah.
But they're not immortal.
Right. And that kind of gives more weight to what they're trying to do. Even though they know, crap, we can get killed doing this, we're still going to do it anyway.
They can be thrown off the top of a building and survive, but you know, there are certain things that even they can't survive.
Right.
Well, do they really have a choice? I mean, they were brought back without a choice, and there's a wall, so they can't leave, and there's somebody guarding outside the wall, so they can't. Presumably, we can't get past him. And you know, if they want to survive, their only real choice is to fight, and the better odds of surviving is with a bigger group, so they're more inclined to save other people.
But that becomes the question of the choice. If the human died and it became a vessel, and the angel came in, was the angel assigned? Is this the angel's job? Is something like that? It's not like the human didn't have a choice, and as all of a sudden the human becomes an angel. An angel has populated the human,
right?
And so that becomes a bigger question: is it a predestined role? Is it a job that they have volunteered for?
Jordan is not the angel. Jordan is the vessel for Enoch, the angel.
Right.
So, all right, now that brings up a question. So, somebody dies.
This is deeper than a sarlacc.
A demon comes in and takes possession of the body, and now the walking around the meat puppet is the demon moving the meat puppet. Same thing with the angels. Somebody dies, the angel comes in. But
it also transforms them. The demons transform them into like monsters, and the angels transform into metal beings.
The industrial warrior.
That didn't happen to Jack. Jack stayed Jack.
Jack did not stay Jack.
But he still had the same mannerisms, had the same speech patterns.
Until
and then he eventually like sprouted wings.
He sprouted wings and decided to go, fly up. And he goes, "I love being a demon," and starts flying up to figure out what's up in space.
But he seemed like he was so whack. Knick-knack, paddywhack.
Yes, exactly.
What dog do you want to give a bone?
So, I mean, and that's one of the things that kind of got me while reading this, was that all of a sudden it became very visceral. It wasn't a righteous war, we have swords and I'll strike you down with a flaming sword kind of thing. It was as gritty as the cityscape. It was, everything, it wasn't clean. It wasn't... it did not appear, holy and sanctified and things like that. Yeah. It appeared dirty. It appeared, very humanesque. It's just going to be, down and earthly and how they're doing everything.
If I ever get the chance to meet Robert Kirkman, I would love to ask him if he's read this book, because there's some draws here between this and The Walking Dead. Yeah. Where,
insurmountable odds.
And it's more about their survival.
Yeah, a group coming together
in a real way, as opposed to like it's this holy crusade.
Angelic.
Yeah,
right.
where
exactly.
That's actually really good. Yeah.
And I do think that this has been fundamental to a lot of authors. A lot of Ted McKeever's stuff has been referenced by other people that, if you haven't had a chance, read some Ted McKeever. But it's always like one of those, the cool kids are always reading something that nobody's ever heard of and stuff.
It would be, if you didn't appreciate this book and you didn't really like sit down and read it, I could very easily see someone slapping a pretentious label on this book.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And
Here,
actually,
here's
some
your
of the
black
reviews,
beret. Here's your coffee.
Yeah.
There you go.
There was some people that I was reading that kept coming back to and pretentious dialogue, and I'm like, really?
Not the dialogue. I don't get that. Like overall pretentious, sure, maybe.
Yeah.
The dialogue is very natural. Okay, aside from like the biblical stuff that's obviously like biblical quotes, the discussion between people is very real.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that kind of shocked me. Like I didn't there's a humor in this book that's very it reminds me of my own humor. And I didn't really realize that they were making jokes until maybe like the 4th or 5th issue, and I'm like, oh, they're not being serious there. That's a joke. That's he's singing the song from The Wizard of Oz. All right, that's just supposed to be funny.
And McKeever has that a lot through a lot of the things he does. That there is that kind of black humor.
I didn't
going through.
realize it until Eddie came into the book.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
like,
and
oh,
when
okay.
Eddie comes into it, everything just goes
It's
off
like,
the rails.
here's
with that.
Michael Keaton. Let's. Can you imagine if they made the Deadpool movie in the '80s and Michael Keaton would have been Deadpool?
Oh.
Yeah, I kind of
Oh,
see
actually
that
really
happening.
good.
Yeah,
All right.
that would be interesting.
I'd watch that.
I might have to actually watch that one. All right, but as this book goes on, you have this constant struggle between good and evil, even with some of the good people starting to get self-centered and stuff near the end, and that's when Noah gets brought into the scene, he's doing everything, and he's the only one who doesn't know about the other angels, and he's trying to protect his little group of humans. But when the other angels come in, there is kind of a I'm no longer in charge, and
Well, in hindsight, initially, yes, I thought that he was just threatened by Sarah coming in and I'm in charge now. We're all going to do this and that. That's what I initially thought, and his reaction to that, I was like, that's not very angelic. But then later on, it's sort of revealed that it's like carrying the one ring. The longer you hang on to this, the worse you get.
Right.
And it was starting to drain on all of them. And
right, because Gabriel was having a problem.
Oh
and,
yeah.
And,
I didn't recognize him when you'd make the jump to Metropole AD. When I first saw him, I thought he was Noah, and then they call him Gabriel. I'm like, that's Gabriel?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see, I mean, the difference between Metropole and Metropole AD is you actually see the wear on the character.
Yeah.
You don't know the time period, but you assume it's been months or maybe a year.
Actually,
it's a year.
Yeah, I think it's a year,
Okay.
a year or a little longer than a year is what it is.
Actually, I think it's the end of Metropole. It says, "Join us in the fall when a year
Well,
has passed."
I presume that had been. Okay, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that may
like
one
that.
of like the tag things in the letters to the editor kind of thing.
I didn't read those at any time.
Well,
a lot of
in all honesty, don't read the letters to the editor. A bunch of mental masturbation.
You're
going on.
pretentious.
But the around the letters to the editors, the
little
end,
side things.
there's always like a single image, and then had quotes.
I read
underneath
that.
it.
I read those.
Those were brilliant.
Yeah, those were good.
I really liked it, and that was another thing that really got me about this was there's a level of reading that you almost had to have a reading list. In order to get all the references I'm going to throw into this book, you need to have read this.
like the Bible. All of it.
And some
Get the
Shakespeare
church.
and some Socrates.
I am not religious. I have read more of the Bible, probably more than most religious people have, and I feel like that did me very well in reading this book.
Well, honestly, I was reading it, and I'm like, I don't think that that's actually in the Bible. It was written in that style, but some of it I was like, I don't
Well,
think that's
remember,
actually in the Bible.
remember how many different translations there
True.
are of
True.
these books.
But the other thing is, if
Of
you
those
take
books.
that book or issue 7, which really is it's not word for word from the Book of Enoch, but it more or less it's a paraphrase of it. And so you've got that whole piece, and then when you get into AD, they actually quote Revelations. There's a whole. I mean, it's a whole 5 or 6 verses, just a straight up quote of Revelations that pushes the story along.
Yeah.
And it's like, geez, you're tying all this together, and it's impressive how you're doing it, but man, that's not the picture I had in my mind when I originally read this.
Yes.
But holy cow!
Yeah.
Now, one of the interesting questions that I always have is, were you disappointed with the end?
Yes.
You haven't gotten there yet.
No, I thought the assignment was Metropole. I thought I was doing extra reading by reading at Metropole AD. So I have not yet finished that.
Yeah.
Okay, but Metropole got you to the point where it seems all hope is lost.
Yeah.
And at the end of Metropole, I was like, this is great. I can't wait for the next piece to come out, see how they resolve this. When Metropole AD came out and it was only 3 issues, I was like, how is he going to resolve this? It's going to have to be just either terribly rushed or just a horrible ending.
Yeah.
I thought it was more rushed than horrible.
That's what I like about it. I was so invested in the story by the time I got to AD that I didn't want it to be over in 3 issues, and I wanted a bigger battle.
I mean, that's just...
But when the reality of the situation, when they showed it, I was like, yeah, there's only one way that this can end. Yeah.
That's just a common theme where, art gets restricted by the industry.
Right.
A very recent example is the final episode of the first season of Star Trek Discovery, where they had to jam that whole... It's beautiful until the last episode, and they have to jam that ending into the last episode, and they just kick the curb.
Yeah.
An older example having to do with comics is Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis, where he submitted a manuscript that was 1,000 pages.
Jeez.
And the publishers said, okay, well, we'll give you 400. And the first time I read it, I'm like, this is the most disjointed story. That's because it was missing 600 pages.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So, sometimes art has one vision and the industry says, yeah, well, we can't pay for that.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, you look at what it took to do Lord of the Rings, the movies and stuff like that, and there's so much missing when you compare it to the books and things like that. And that was 12 hours worth of.
Yeah, and it was still a long movie. Yeah.
You step back and you're like, geez, there's more.
Yeah.
So I understand, but that brings up an interesting thing. A lot of what McKeever has done has always been. People have said, "Oh, I'd love to see a movie of it," but nobody has. I think Eddie Current was picked up and movie rights were bought for Eddie Current, but it never went anywhere.
Michael Keaton.
But a lot of this stuff you go like, oh, this would be great as a movie, but
how could you do it?
Exactly. How could you do it? I mean, who would direct?
I think you
Metropol?
would lose so much in the telling of the story just because the visuals is so much a part of this story, almost as much as the story itself is how they portray it.
Well, I would liken this to anime, where they try to make live action adaptations of anime all the time, and 9 times out of 10 it just fails.
Oh yeah,
because you just literally cannot translate that one medium into the next medium.
Right.
But then again, there are creative people out there who think of new things and try new things, and you see a movie like Sin City.
Yeah, that was the exception to the rule. I think that one translated well.
I think that structure, Robert Rodriguez, the way he did the, with the backdrops and everything, and that mixture of animation and live action and stuff, I think could pull this out.
Yeah.
Plus, with his forte and Frank Miller's forte towards absolute violence and everything like that, I think would be able to pull a lot of the graphic that comes out of this and pull it out into that whole process.
I think the larger obstacle for this becoming a movie would actually just be the studio okaying a script that was accurate in terms of the source material, because I don't think that the general American audience goer would appreciate this. Yeah. And honestly, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Oh, this would definitely end up being an art house flick or something like that, because again, you have to have some kind of basis of the information that you're getting.
But in order to do this visual style, you probably need the budget of a larger movie.
Definitely.
So it's pushing and pulling and tearing in different directions.
A Scanner Darkly. Remember that one?
Oh yeah.
That would translate well into this.
I mean,
that style, yeah.
Also, I don't want to say Alex's favorite person, but I think THX, George Lucas, kind of reminds me of this as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, really if you go all the way back to there, yes, and you stay away from that crap commercial stuff that he does.
Why would you say such a thing about American Graffiti? You're a jerk. That launched Harrison Ford's career.
I do love that movie. But I mean, I was thinking about the actual question of, you know, who would you get to make this movie, and I started thinking about of all the directors, and I don't even think he's directing anymore, but David Lynch.
Oh yeah.
You know, thinking back to, you know, everything from Eraserhead all the way up through Blue Velvet and you know, all of the stuff that he did. There is such a, he is the closest person I could come up with that could come up with this visual style and translate it to the screen. But then you come up with who's going to play Sarah?
Gwendolyn Christie, very easily. Absolutely. Nobody, they could never cast anybody but her.
That's amazing.
I mean, because I kept seeing the size of the character that he drew, and I was going Ving Rhames, you know, somebody, you know, have him doing that character.
David Lynch, the last thing he did was Twin Peaks last year.
Oh, the TV remake.
The remake,
or not remake, the next one,
or whatever.
That was HBO or something like that. It was one of those things. I wanted to watch it, but I was like, I'm not buying HBO just to watch one show.
One of the directors I have the biggest love-hate relationship with is Tim Burton, and I would like to see what he would do with this visually, but I wouldn't want him near the script at all.
I could see him doing the visual work on this.
I really wish sometimes he would just be like an art guy.
Yeah.
And less of a director.
Could you imagine Danny Elfman doing the music for this?
No.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Get some of Danny Elfman's other music, the Oingo Boingo dark stuff that he did,
or dun 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 dun.
Yeah, well, let's try not to go that direction.
I'm not sure that a film adaptation of this would have music.
It very much was it No Country for Old Men. Mm-hmm. You know, there is no soundtrack to that, and you don't even notice that there's no soundtrack because the story propels the whole feeling of dread and everything that's going on. You don't need to be reminded. I was watching a show on Netflix the other night, and it just drove me nuts. That I was like, oh, I know what's about to happen because the you know, and it's like, oh, come on, just let it go, just let the action unfold in front of me, and I'll be fine. I don't need to be warned. But that I keep thinking about that. There's a lot of comics that you read comics. Yeah, I mean, this is frame for frame. We can make this into a movie. I Kill Giants. Yep. They took that and
which we will be doing on a future episode of Between the Panels.
Yes, and it was. Frame for frame, you know, they did an excellent job in translating it over to a movie.
Yeah, that worked really well.
This one, though I believe a little bit longer than the I Kill Giants storyline, there's so much going on in this that you're right. The budget's going to have to be pretty huge in order to make something like this happen. But you know, as we get through this whole thing, one of the big things I keep coming back to is that. When this came out, there really wasn't anything else like it. Yeah. From everything from the art style, but just to the storytelling, it wasn't clean. It wasn't a nice wrap up. You know, when you get to the end, it's all burned to the ground. Yeah. You know, there is, but you're right. There's no other way it's going to end.
Yeah, it had to go that way. I mean, generally, I like stories where the bad guy wins. Empire Strikes Back. Loved it. I like when the bad guys win because it sort of upsets the status quo.
It's more realistic.
Nobody won.
Is that not even more realistic?
It is. I think it is. And again, I'm looking for escapism, even if it's like an apocalyptic escape.
Yeah, and in this one, when you finish, you put the book down, and you're like, oh,
you know,
well, maybe my life isn't that bad because that sucked.
Could be worse.
Yeah. Different people have very different ideas of what escapism is. Mm-hmm. I can give you a very real example. Happened last week. So my better half and I, she's very much into the medical drama shows, particularly Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait, I know. Well, but don't we all have that problem though? All right.
My wife loves Grey's Anatomy too.
I cannot watch anything that takes place in a hospital, regardless if the show is good or not, because the fact that it's in the hospital and people like get sick and die, especially kids, just stresses me out so bad. Even like House and Scrubs are wonderful shows. I cannot watch them because they take place in hospitals because it puts me on so much on edge that I cannot enjoy it. Now, last week, my daughter and I are watching Jurassic Park 3, and it's just the scene where Dr. Grant is getting chased by the raptors, and she's sitting there, my better half is sitting there watching it with us, and she's like, I'm so stressed out right now, I cannot watch this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Why is this stressing you out? Because look at they're going to rip them apart. I'm like, yeah, but this could never happen.
Yeah.
It's just two totally different perspectives there.
Well, and that's true. I mean, you guys know the type. I don't read superhero comics and stuff like that.
Or watch good movies.
Did you enjoy that issue of Doomsday Clock you bought yesterday?
I am enjoying the. I haven't read that one yet. I am enjoying the Doomsday Clock because it's there's so much contradictory of what the Alan Moore universe and the DC universe, and I'm enjoying how they're positing it and how they're kind of combining the two together and stuff like that. But there's still enough of a commentary going on inside itself about the two different ways of doing the superhero stories and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's definitely more off the left field. It's not a normal superhero story.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have read superhero stories and stuff like that. I am a huge Deadpool fan, and I'm not quite sure that's a superhero or is that an anti-hero or.
Watch Deadpool 2 and then let's have a discussion on that.
All right.
Because that's actually one of my nitpicks about that movie.
All right, but I always gravitate towards the ones that are story. I don't want stories that go on forever. I want a story. And that's one of the most important things to me when I start reading comics is that there is a defined story that's being told, and it's a good story, and there's an end. There will be an end. It may be 12 issues, or it may be 60 issues, or like Sandman, what was it, 89 issues. But there was...
Counting the offshoots.
Well, not even counting the offshoots. The actual Sandman line, yes, there were arcs within it, but there was a definitive end that was coming.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, and I kind of gravitate towards that because I don't want to get trapped into stories like a lot of superheroes. Let's reboot the universe because we've ended this. Let's bring this person back to life. It's not really dead. Maybe he's dead, but there's it's a sleep and dream.
I agree with what you're saying, and that's actually why I read manga for most of my life, and it took me a long time to get into superheroes because I was so intimidated because I didn't know where to start. Because, every manga has volume 1 and there's this to this and you start here and you finish here and it's over. Right. And I didn't know where to start with superhero comics. But I think the perspective for most people is they're not locked. If you're a Superman fan, you're not locked. There are some. You're not locked into reading every issue of every run. They see it as a very casual thing. I'll read what I want to read and I won't read what I don't want to read.
Right, and so I've always approached comics the same way I approach other literature styles. Is that I'm not looking for a casual read. If I am picking up a casual read, it's something I pick up, read, and drop away and don't ever reference again. Right. But most of the time, I'm trying to seek out really good stories. Things that are making me think, things that are making me consider, maybe make me want to look at something completely different and stuff. So even the fiction I read is kind of pushes me in those directions. And so I expect the same thing from my comics because I just see it as a visual storytelling. I don't see it as escapism. I don't see it as fluff writing or anything like that. I still want
my problem with it could be the best story in the world. Just like I really like the story Metropole, but my feelings on the end of it were jaded by the fact that was it. That's the end of the story. There's not going to be any more. No. They set it to where there probably almost could be.
Ted McKeever retired from comics in 2016.
Yeah, so there's no more coming.
Yeah,
and that makes
till his comeback tour.
When he runs out of money, and he decides he's going to publish something else.
I don't know anything about Ted McKeever's finances, but I doubt he retired to a pile of money.
No, my understanding was he was satisfactorily paid, but the reason he was quitting. And the reason he gave at the end of his last run, Pencilhead, that when he ended was he says, I just can't work in this this medium anymore. It has gotten, a creator artist is having too many difficulties to do it.
The blog post I read, and granted this was not what you would call an academic source, but he said that quote from Ted McKeever, I'm not having fun doing this anymore.
Right. Yeah, and that once it becomes a job, and your creativity, the creativity is going to go down.
And then, there are a lot of great comic books that are being published today, but in the past 5 years, there have been like a lot of industry decisions and shifts that we in the industry, we in the lower end of the industry would say are negative.
Yeah.
All right, so this was your pick. So if Ted is watching and you could ask him one thing or tell him one thing, what would you say?
What are you worth, Ted?
Jeez.
Would you or would you not cast Clint Howard as every role in this story? Clint Howard could play any character, any of them.
Actually,
like
I saw Clint Howard as Gabriel.
Yeah, that was the one that stuck out in my head.
I would see him as Gabriel.
Getting off work at the video store, taking my hard-earned paycheck, $3 an hour, going down to the corner.
I think I would ask Ted specifically about this comic. What was his true inspiration for writing this story?
Where did the idea come from?
Was it based on truly the Book of Enoch, or was that just a means to tell a story? What was his motivation? Because he has come out and said in various interviews and stuff that a lot of what he writes has personal reference to him, especially post Faith, which is the one after Metropole AD and stuff. But when you get into Plastic Jesus and you get into Super Annotated Man and things like that, those are, I'm sorry, not Plastic Jesus, Miniature Jesus.
Yeah.
It's Plastic Forks, Miniature Jesus.
But in order to get into Miniature Jesus, you do have to get through the plastic that he comes in.
And his broken off arm. And that's the first book, and I think the only book I've ever seen where the little Plastic Jesus flips off somebody. He actually folds the little fingers up and everything. It's hysterical. But he always has a lot of very personal writing, or story or experience.
I mean, he's trying to convey himself.
He's putting something out there, some experience he's had or he knows about and stuff like that. And so I've always been interested as to what inspired this story. And so I think that's where I would go. And
I'm actually going to take that question. I want to tweet it at him tomorrow.
Okay, you do that.
See if he gets back.
All right.
And then I'm actually going to do that when he forgets to do it.
Yeah.
If you get a social media person on staff,
But by the way, we need to talk about that because there's some rank winds blowing.
Rank winds, rank wars.
If you know how I would introduce myself if I was Ted McKeever?
No.
I am Ted Theodore McKeever. I'll change the world. You know why it ended so poorly? No Wild Stallions.
There was no Wild. Yes.
There's no music.
That's right. There is no music. Okay.
We need Rufus.
All right. So that kind of wraps us up at this point. So if you found that you at least were intrigued by what we've been talking about, and you go to your local comic shop and you can't find back issues because this truly is
they don't exist.
Yeah. It is out of print. The only thing you can find is McKeever managed to get done the 3 of the proposed 6 volumes of the Library of Ted McKeever. This is volume 3. Metropole and Metropole AD are incorporated into it, and he actually was very specific. He wanted them in black and white. He actually chose the size and everything, so it's not like a standard comic size. It's done a little different. They're hardbound, and so what we talked about with the coloring kind of does change the way the story is told. But he wanted the collection to be done in black and white.
And to clarify, there is no trade paperback of this book.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no Wikipedia page for this book.
Yeah.
So and I'm not recommending you do this, but there are CBRs bouncing around on the internet that I mean, and they even are harder and harder to find because
Let me-
it's truly it is kind of an out of print.
Let me jump in here as a comic book store employee and as a patron and a slave of the comic book industry. We don't endorse CBRs or the websites where you can read comic books for free, but in a circumstance where you cannot locate a legitimate copy of this book and it's between not reading it because you can't find it, or downloading those CBRs, we want you to participate in the discussion. So download those CBRs.
Yeah, and what I have found is that you won't be well, you probably will be disappointed, but the three of you out there who won't be disappointed, feel free to contact us. We'll talk. But yeah, that's it. And so, but if you really like this, some of the other Ted McKeever to get, you can, obviously follow up Metropole with Metropole AD. If you want to step back one, Eddie Current,
I'm reading that.
the 12 issue, it's called a 12-hour book because the 12 issues are 1 hour at a time when after Eddie Current escapes from an insane asylum. Metaphor, which is actually an award-winning book that he put out in 2008, I believe, and then Miniature Jesus, which was the one of the most recent ones he's done with Super Annotated Man. It's been within the last couple of years. And those ones, the art style has changed a bit. He's gone more black and white with a lot of those in the art style, but they're still unbelievable stories. They're really good and stuff. So, pick up some of the other stuff that you still can get. I know you can get Metaphor is available in trade, and Miniature Jesus is available in trade, as well as Super Annotated Man is available in trade right now. And who knows for how long, but they're available.
If you enjoyed Metropole, I do have a few recommendations that aren't even comic books. The whole time I was reading this, I was really in the frame of mind of one of my favorite anime directors, Satoshi Kon, who did Perfect Blue, Paprika, Millennium Actress, Tokyo Godfathers. I really think there's a very high likelihood that he has read at least some of Ted McKeever's work. If you haven't seen any of those movies and you liked Metropole even a little bit, check them out. I wanted to read this book twice before we did this episode because I feel like there are layers to it. And every time you read it, you kind of peel back one layer and see a little more. And that's how I've always described the films of Satoshi Kon to people, particularly Perfect Blue, which is my favorite one, which every time I watch it, there's something new. And that's about a Japanese pop idol who's followed by a stalker, and it takes a violent turn. So, yeah, definitely check that one out. But, yeah, just want to throw that in there.
All right. And so, now that we're finishing this up, what are you reading?
What am I reading? I'm going to read Eddie Current's what I'm going to read. That's next. I don't know. I actually might read this again and then flip back to Eddie Current.
I'll probably read Metropole again in the future.
Yeah.
I have been reading this off and on again since 1991. Every few years, I end up picking it up again and kind of going through it because I'll see something on television or I'll have a discussion that kind of just will pop something of this into my mind, and I'll go ahead and read it again. And you're right. I often I was like, wow, I don't remember that little piece, or that was something that
I missed that.
And it could be the fact that I'm older, my kids have grown up, and all this kind of stuff, and so there's different ways of looking at this just based on my perspective.
And you have more control over your brain, and your brain isn't half asleep throughout most of the day.
So, all right, so there's no more McKeever to read. What are you reading?
Right now, I'm doing a lot of Brian Vaughan saga. I actually just finished up.
Was he in The Wedding Singers?
Wrong Vaughan. I just finished up Why the Last Man.
Ooh, yeah.
And actually, I gave it to my son to read because he wanted something meaty. Yeah. And that's like
that'll do it.
I want to say it's like 7, maybe 8 trades.
It's a big collection.
Yeah. It may even be more than that. Maybe 10 trades.
Oh no, 10 trades.
Yeah.
Sorry.
For a small story, it is.
For yeah. Okay.
But I really enjoyed that one and what it was going on. So I've been reading a lot of him, and actually one of the serials I've been getting here is Lazarus.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a really interesting one with the way they're putting out the kind of the future world, that it's not corporations who own everything, it's not governments who own everything, it's certain families. And if you work for the families, you're good. If you don't, you're called waste. And
harsh.
Right, exactly. And there's these battles between these families and stuff like that for control, and they have their own militaries and all this kind of stuff.
It's
and
very 1930s Chicago.
No, more 1930s Chicago overlaid over very future, kind of post-apocalyptic future stuff.
Yeah.
The haves really have everything. The have-nots really don't have anything.
Right.
And
there's no middle class.
Really, there really isn't. And very well done. Very, very detailed world building in this one, because even what you would take as the normal comic book ad for something else is actually part of the comic story itself. They're ads for the families. They're ads for
cool.
working for the industry of this family or something like that.
That's really cool.
And it's like, wow, they've gone all out, because it looks like a full page color ad for some movie that's coming up or something. And you start reading it, it's like, oh wait. That's Hawk. That's one of the families in this. That's Bittinger. Wait,
really cool.
what? And so you start reading everything in there to get all this stuff. And they got like fake news articles and stuff like that in the back and things like that. Really well done. I've enjoyed that one a lot. What are you reading?
So I've been reading almost nonstop My Wife Wagasuma-san, which I talked a little bit about on our other show this week of Four Horsemen, which is about the high school student who he's the loser, and he has these slips into the future where he's falling asleep and he's married to the girl of his dreams, and he's trying to correlate that future with his present, and like, how did that happen? How do I make that happen?
How do I not screw this up?
Yeah. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on that because we talked about that on the other show.
Yeah.
But I do want to throw out something I didn't mention on the show. He's in this club that reminds me of the anime club that I was in high school, but their club it's an anti-life havers club, so they are against the students who have lives. They're
Wow.
They're the anti-life havers. They have these meetings like, how are we going to bring down the life havers? We can't tolerate them, and they have the best code names. They each have their own secret code names. Matrix 2, Electric Medusa, Gate of Flesh.
Gate of Flesh.
And my favorite one is Laputa Castle in the Sky, which is a Studio Ghibli film. Until that member levels up and they upgrade his codename to Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is a better Studio Ghibli. No, that's not true. That's me. Castle in the Sky is better. But also, I just got caught up with Harrow County, which is a Dark Horse book. It's a horror comic that takes place in the backwoods of Virginia, very close to the West Virginia border. So kind of similar to the Robert Kirkman book Outcast, which actually takes place in rural West Virginia. This takes place in a similar area, and it's about this girl who is actually the reincarnation of a witch who the village hung on a tree of her father's farm, and like the tree absorbed her and then birthed out this baby, and her dad found the baby and raised her, and now she's coming of age and she's starting to gain the powers of the witch that she's the reincarnation of.
Oh, wow.
And it brings her into conflict with her father, with the villagers, with the, as they call them, the Hants. The Hants that live, they're the demons, the creatures, the ghosts that live in the woods.
Haints.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's cool.
When you go to some of your extension things down south, mention Haints, and you'll get all sorts of stories, stories about West Virginia.
It is phenomenal. I think it might be one of the best horror comics that's out there right now. Okay. It's really, the art is beautiful. It's very, very graphic. Her sidekick is a skinless child, and she carries his skin in her satchel, and that's how she communicates with him. The skinless child actually can't speak, but he communicates telepathically, and it comes out of the mouth of his skin, which just hangs around in her satchel pack. And it's
that's out there.
That's a little creepy.
I could go on, but pick it up. It's Harrow County. It's really good.
All right, cool. All right, so next episode
we're doing Superman Red Sun.
Yep.
So we're going to be reading that in June. We'll be back on the first Saturday of July to have a discussion on that, just like we did here.
Yep.
That is the what if story for Superman, where what if Clark Kent landed in the USSR instead of the USA? And I'm going to put a disclaimer out there. I think I speak for all of us when saying we're not particularly Superman fans here. I mean,
I've always been anti-Superman.
I respect
Bloody alien.
I respect the status that Superman has in the comic book industry. I've never been an advocate or a fan of his character or stories, but this one is phenomenal.
It's enough of a twist that it makes Superman very interesting. This Superman version very interesting.
And you not only do you get to see like the Soviet Superman, because he grows up in the USSR, he becomes indoctrinated, he's a communist, he finds his place in the Communist Party to the point where, he eventually becomes the ruler of the USSR. And not only do you get to see that, you get to see the flip version of a lot of other popular DC characters. Lex Luthor is basically his rival in the United States. He's like the scientist that all the American presidents are going to be like, you need to come up with something in the arms race instead of a nuclear arms race in this history, there's a super powered people arms race, and Lex Luthor is the Americans' go-to guy. Batman, Bruce Wayne, is a Russian orphan whose parents were killed by the Communist Party, and he becomes an anti-communist terrorist in the USSR who's trying to bring down the Communist Party. Wonder Woman's in it. Hal Jordan's in it. Lois Lane is in it.
That's awesome.
Lois Lane is the wife of Lex Luthor in this book. Jimmy Olsen's in it. Perry White's in it. It's really cool. I can't recommend it enough.
All right. Well, I'm actually looking forward to that.
I think you're going to enjoy it, and I cannot say the words. I think Alex John will like this many times.
No.
So this is actually Ron's pick. Ron was struggling. He's like, I don't know what to pick, and I was like, just take something off your want to read list, and this is an excuse to read it.
Yes. And
we've mentioned this book several times. So so we're going to jump into our social media stuff, and then we're going to end the show with a quote. Like we always do, please. Well, please like us at facebook.com/4horsemancomics. Follow us on Instagram at 4horsemancomics. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/4horsemancomics gaming. Follow us on Twitter at the number 4horsemancomics. Watch all of our streaming content at twitch.tv/4horsemancomics. Shop our TCG inventory at shop.4horsemancomics.com. Check out all three of our great locations in Waynesburg, PA, and Bridgeport and Morgantown, West Virginia. Morgantown store is the best one. Make sure to check out our previous episode 1 on Batman the Killing Joke, and tune in next month for Superman Red Sun. Marvel will get to you, I swear.
We're coming, Marvel.
We're coming.
Write better stories.
Oh!
All right.
Shots fired!
I want to end out with a quote. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's from one of the opening episodes. Oh, good Lord. Really? But this is one of my. It kind of sets the tone of the whole story, and this is the panel that this comes from. And this is, you're kind of in Nortrot's head, or it's Enoch.
Jasper is talking to Enoch.
Yeah, they're kind of having this discussion at the same time. So you're not really sure who's saying it, but I kind of think it's Enoch is the one who's saying it. But the quote is, "They say the sky's the limit. Sounds confining to me. The thought of open space is frightening. Too many miles, too many smooth areas. With so much space between us, it gives room for something to fill in the gaps. Maybe that's what's coming. Something to fill in the gaps."
And to completely wreck this, Alex, I have a question for you. Does your wife know that you named your son after a Metropole character?
Wow, I hadn't even thought about that. No, because we named him after the biblical character. But yeah, it could be the Metropole character.
Well, you can now tell yourself for the rest of your life that's what
yes.
Or just start calling everybody Sacriel.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to read Superman Red Sun. We'll see you on the first Saturday in July.
Later.
God, I hope that's not the 4th.